What happens when you combine WALLE, Hadestown, and crooner-style jazz? You get Maybe Happy Ending, the new musical that opened this season on Broadway. This original musical quickly became one of the most talked about shows of this Broadway season, and one of its most unexpected success stories. And that is really for very good reason, as it is one of the best new original shows to hit Broadway in years. The show, starring Darren, Criss, and Helen Shen, follows two Helperbots in near-future South Korea who are outdated models of a futuristic type of robot designed to help humans with everyday tasks, who have, for different reasons that you find out throughout the show, been abandoned by their owners and left to live in a robot retirement community. The show opens with both of them learning that their replacement parts have been discontinued, meaning that it is only a matter of time before they break down and stop working forever. And the show follows their lives, for lack of a better term, after this moment. But what makes this show so good that has made it one of the strongest ground-up word-of-mouth shows to hit Broadway in years? Turning from what appeared at the beginning of previews to be a show that was going to flop incredibly quickly, to one that might be an awards contender when it comes to the Tonys. First, I think I want to delve into the WALL-E comparison of this show, because I am not the first person to compare this show to WALL-E. This has become a common talking point with this show, and I think a lot of people think that this is solely because it is a show that is a love story featuring two robots and a plant as characters. But that really isn't all of the comparison. The entire show really just explodes with the earnest joy and charm of a Pixar movie at its best, in a way that you really wouldn't be shocked to see that bouncing lamp intro at the beginning of the show. The show features only 4 characters, and you spend most of your time with only 2 of them, but you fall so instantly in love with those 2 characters. Once again, I know I'm not the first person to make this comparison. I'm sure I won't be the last, because it is a very apt comparison in ways that go beyond just the obvious. And as for the Hadestown comparison, that requires a bit too much spoilers for the plot of the show for me to get into in this video, but just trust me there, okay? Now, for a brief description of the show's plot without major spoilers. The show is at its heart a story about 2 people that are in a retirement community and fall into a romance with each other. It just so happens to be that they are robots. We start with Darren Criss's Oliver alone in his room and learn about his obsession with jazz and his belief that his owner is going to be picking him up someday from this robot retirement community, and that he is willing to wait for his owner no matter how long it takes because of how dedicated to his owner he is, and this unflinching loyalty he still has to him even years after he has last seen his owner in person or communicated with him in any way apart from getting a monthly subscription to a jazz magazine from him. But relatively early in the show, he learns that his replacement parts have been discontinued after his Wi-Fi chip stops working and he is unable to get a replacement, meaning that from now on, when any part of him breaks down, he will be unable to repair it, and he is going to be slowly reaching the end of his service life. So suddenly, his timeline for seeing his owner again significantly shortens. And when we meet Helen Shen's Claire, she has a bit more of an urgent need, as she has an already broken charger, which threatens to permanently tie her to a wall and make her unable to leave her room, as opposed to Oliver's issue of a Wi-Fi chip where he just can't connect to the internet, at least initially, albeit being aware that more problems will eventually arise. Claire is actually a newer model than Oliver. She is a 5 and Oliver is a 3 within the American version of the show, but she is a model that was poorly made, so she is falling apart faster than he is. They are neighbors for years, but they only meet when she needs to borrow his charger in order to prevent her from shutting down permanently, and from there they begin to form a friendship and eventually decide to sneak out of their community on a road trip together, with Oliver's potted plant Hwaboon in tow as well, who is a full-fledged character in himself in this show and has his own photo and bio in the playbill. Now, to continue discussing, the cast is all around brilliant in this Broadway production of Maybe Happy Ending, and that includes Hwaboon. Darren, Criss, and Helen Shen, who by far have the largest parts in this 4-person show, have absolutely brilliant chemistry with each other, both in terms of friendship and their eventual romance, and play their Helperbots with such humanity, all while making their robotic nature always apparent. Criss, being an older model, is more stiff and traditionally robotic, while Shen is able to be a bit more free with her movements. And the dynamic between the 2 of them and how they are both robotic in their own unique ways in terms of physicality is incredibly impressive. Now, by this point in his career, Darren Criss's talents should be well known, and they are very well showcased in this show. He sounds incredible on all of the songs, and he gets a lot of chances to showcase his comedic acting very well, as well as a few moments of genuine heartbreak in the show. And Helen Shen makes an incredible Broadway debut in this show with her ability to match Darren Criss's humor and make us all aware and feel the frantic pace with which her Claire has to live her life at this current moment, recognizing her days are incredibly limited, even more limited than Oliver. Des Duran portrays the jazz crooner that Oliver and his previous owner James were obsessed with, and his voice purposely captures that style of music, and while his part is more limited, he's a scene stealer with just how distinct his voice captures just the inherent nostalgia of that type of music from that era, and how that characterizes Oliver and his personality. And Marcus Choi, meanwhile, portrays everyone else in the show, including Oliver's owner James significantly. He mostly portrays a series of bit characters that appear only in one scene, mostly for comedic effect, as well as being the character in the show's pre-show, sitting on stage reading a book while listening to some music. Now, there are a couple of other characters that appear in this show, but they only appear through recorded scenes on screens. The 4 actors that I've highlighted are the only ones that you are going to see live on stage during the show. And I'm not going to reveal what those additional characters are because basically every single one of them is a significant plot spoiler. And the characters I have listed also very often appear in those scenes that appear on screens. This is notably not being done in like a Sunset Boulevard type way where they're recording on stage and you are watching the recording on a screen. This is typically done when you are like watching a memory of one of the robots because they're robots and so they record everything. And so you are essentially watching them watch themselves. Beyond the cast, the production of this show is remarkable in basically every aspect. The score, written by Will Aronson and Hugh Park, brilliantly blends musical genres together, most significantly utilizing classic jazz styles and some more modern musical theater styles, and features several incredibly catchy songs. I am personally desperately waiting to be able to hear The Way That It Has to Be and Hitting the Road Again when the cast album comes out. The cast album has been announced at this point. It will be coming out in spring of 2025. There is, however, already an album of this show in its original Korean. The album will be the first in English. And the book, by the same writers, matches the score's earnest charm perfectly. For me, the difference between a good and a great musical often comes down to the book, which I find most often to be the thing that is lacking in new musical writing. And this show's book is incredibly engaging and strong. And then on top of how strong the writing is, you have Michael Arden's direction elevating it. And every single element of the production just firing on absolutely all cylinders. The set is incredibly elaborate and very visually impressive, as is the lighting. And they all just combine into something that is incredibly transportive into a world that is in the near future and is something familiar but just distinct enough to be from a different time than ours. All of the locations in this show, from the apartments of each character, to a car on the road, to the inside of the memories of each of the 2 central robots, and more locations that I'm not going to spoil, one in particular that is incredibly visually impressive throughout the theater. Every location featured within this show is just created on that stage to incredibly impressive effect. It is obviously a very expensive production. That money was very well spent. I just want to say, I recognize that the majority of the clips that you have been watching in this video do not showcase how impressive visually that this set is. That you've been watching for the majority of this video, clips of a stage that appears to just be black, with like a simple chair out front and a record player. That is not what the set looks like for the majority of the show. When that black curtain opens up, it reveals some incredibly impressive stagecraft. I cannot show that to you for obvious reasons, but it is truly incredibly impressive in a way that the clips I am able to show you do not showcase. Unfortunately for how impressive the production is, it also brings us to the one major drawback of that production, and that is sightlines. This show, as visually impressive as it is, has a lot of seats that will be partially obstructed. This is a wide theater, and some of the major set pieces are going to be significantly more effective the more centered that you are within the audience. Specifically, the apartments of the main 2 characters, which is one of the most used set pieces in the show. There are interior walls of the apartment rooms that will probably block you if you are sitting off the side. I can say I was somewhat blocked for those set pieces myself. Think the most recent Broadway company revival as a point of reference if you saw that on Broadway or tour. This is just something to be aware of, but as someone who did sit in a seat that was partially obstructed, it did not ruin the show. It is still well worth seeing, even if you are in a spot where you're going to miss a couple of moments. I tell you, it is really that good of a show. This is truly the rare show where every element of the show comes together to form something truly incredible up on that stage as a whole. Recently on Broadway, with a lot of new shows, I have consistently felt that there's been something missing in a lot of new Broadway productions. That maybe the writing is incredible, but the set, the physical production is lacking, or the direction is lacking, or the set is incredibly impressive, but the writing is lacking, or some combination of those, where just every element is not all there at the same time for the same show. This is that show where everything comes together to create something that is honestly better than the sum of its parts. Every element has been perfectly crafted to complement one another up on that stage, to create a production that really is worthy of the level of groundswell support that this show has been receiving. Again, you can look, Broadway ticket sales information is public. The ticket sales for this show, when it started on Broadway, were not good at all, and looked like this show was going to be a quick closing. But people have rallied behind this show, and there is a reason for that. It genuinely is that good. Now, I am someone that has been posting about Broadway shows on the internet for years now, mostly on TikTok, but also here on YouTube. And one of the most consistent comments I get is people begging for more original new musicals. And you know what? This is it. This is that great original new musical that people have been begging for. And I cannot encourage people to go support this show enough.